Today we welcome here Laura Loomer, the most influential American independent journalist who came here to Kyiv, to Ukraine, to see for herself how country is living at war and has been living for the past 4 years. Laura, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here with basically the most famous news reporter in all of Ukraine. So
thank you so
much. I hear you're a very popular broadcaster.
But I hear that you are very influential person in the United States, and you made such a brave decision to come here and to see for yourself what is going on. What was your first impression when you arrived?
Well, it took a very long time to get to Ukraine, as you know, because the airspace is closed. And so there were some people who knew I was coming to Ukraine. I didn't really tell a lot of people because I wanted it to, I wanted to, for security reasons too, I wanted to keep it under wraps because recently I started getting targeted by Russia Today, and, they started posting a lot of really negative things about me. So I figured that I wouldn't tell anybody I was in Ukraine till I was here. But, it's unfortunate that people have to spend such a long time traveling to Ukraine because you can't fly direct. And it was a pain really to, have to get on the train and take a very long train. But I think that really also, put things into perspective for me because it made me realize that the people of Ukraine are literally hostages, and I started to think a lot about how President Trump and the United States of America invested so much time and energy into trying to release the Hamas, the hostages that Hamas was holding in Gaza. And, those are hostages that were held in tunnels. And when you think about it, really, all of Ukraine, in a sense, it's kind of like one giant tunnel where everybody's being held hostage, because to have the ability to freely move taken away from you, it must be very scary, knowing that even if you wanted to buy a plane ticket or hop on a plane and escape Russian missiles, Russian ballistic missiles or drones, you literally can't because you only have a limited amount of train tickets. And so it was kind of shocking to me to see how difficult it is and how far in advance you have to, book all of your train travel. And it made me feel very sad for the people of Ukraine.
When you stepped out of your train in Kyiv, in the capital, was anything you saw around yourself was what you expected to see?
Well, it's a very metropolitan city. It just seemed very, very calm at the time. From what I've seen online, just from social media and news reportings, I was expecting there to be a lot more destruction and a lot more rubble. And of course, the train ended up taking about 15 hours. And so, when I wasn't sleeping and it was light outside, I could look out the window and I could see some of the areas that had been destroyed. And the train conductor was telling us how the Russians try to bomb the train stations to destabilize the ability for people to travel freely. But I was surprised at how, resilient the people of Ukraine are, because you walk out of the train station and people are living their lives. Nobody's hiding. People are happy. People are smiling. People are walking their dogs. I like dogs, and I've noticed that there's a lot of people with dogs here. So I was a little shocked to see how put together the city looked, because I was expecting it to look more devastated from destruction.
Were you scared to travel here?
So I will admit that I was a little nervous the night before traveling, because the day before I was supposed to get on the airplane is when Russia fired 40 ballistic missiles into Kyiv. And so I remember thinking, wow, am I going to get blown up in my hotel? Because that was the most aggressive attack that they have conducted yet, from my understanding, from reading about it, in Kyiv. And so from the news reports, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like that was a pretty significant escalation by Russia. And they've had other attacks, but, I started thinking to myself, am I going to, find myself in a situation now that the United States is talking about secondary sanctions on Russia? Are they going to retaliate by bombing all the Western hotels? Because when I was booking my trip and I said, oh, is there going to be security? And, where are we going to stay? They said that usually all of the Americans or the Europeans or people who travel with NATO delegations, there's like 3 hotels that people usually stay at.
And everybody knows where they are.
And everybody knows what they are. And so it's not like you go to New York City or, some big bustling city, or Paris or Prague, where there's a million hotels. I think that they probably know by now where everybody stays.
You know, not every European or American, even from the NATO delegation, is being welcomed on X by the Ministry of International Affairs, by the Office of the President, by the former UN representative. Were you surprised to see so many people greeted you?
Yeah.
A person who doesn't have any official position in the United States, but it is very influential.
I was shocked. I mean, I didn't know what to really expect. And I knew that I would have some meetings while I was here, but I didn't realize that I would be so well received. I thought maybe some people would be skeptical because of some of the things that I've said about Ukraine and some of the things that I've said about Zelenskyy in the past on my social media. But the people have been so kind, and really the people are just so friendly. And there have been some people who have asked me for selfies. I was looking for an outfit this afternoon, and there was a guy at the store, and he asked me to take a photo, and he said, "Thank you for supporting Ukraine." And I was really shocked when I saw the president's office tweet, because it created so much news. When I posted a video, the video has been seen almost 2 million times of me walking off the train, and I said, "Oh, I'm in Ukraine." And it really almost broke the internet. People in the United States, I think it was the #1 trend on social media on X. And then it caused a debate online about whether or not, you know, she is being sincere and how she feels about Ukraine. And then the president's office chimed in and said, well, it's important that people let her see things for herself.
You said that you said different things about Ukraine before. Where did this information or your understanding of what is going in Ukraine came from?
I mean, I said really horrible things about Ukraine. I said really terrible things. I'll just be honest. And, you know, some people said, oh, you should delete your social media posts. I said, no, I think I'm just going to leave them, because then people can see what I said before and now how I feel. You know, and I don't want people to think I'm trying to cover up the evidence. I said really terrible things. I said, I don't care if Ukraine gets conquered by Putin. I said, I don't care if Ukraine gets taken over by Russia. I said, I don't have any problem with Putin. I used to mock Zelenskyy for not wearing a suit. I used to, you know, I didn't realize I was consuming Russian propaganda, because, you know, there's this interesting dynamic in the United States, because we are viewed as the most powerful country in the world, and our country sends billions of dollars a year to all types of countries all around the world to support them in different means, especially in wartime. But there's a lot of Americans who, and myself included, I still feel this way, that we need to start putting America first. And we have almost $40 trillion of debt in the United States. There are people who are homeless. There's people who are poor. We have a fentanyl crisis. We had under Joe Biden open borders, right? And we had 25 million illegal aliens come into our country, and, you know, we paid for it. And now we are in the middle of, you know, the Iran war as well. And we have a munitions crisis in the United States. And we gave a lot of our munitions and we gave a lot of our weapons and our money to Ukraine. And we didn't really get to vote on that. You know, the American people didn't get to take a vote on whether we wanted nearly $200 billion of our tax dollars to be sent to Ukraine. And our representatives decided.
I was going to say, you delegate your vote.
Yes, we have our representatives, but some people felt like, you know, their representatives were not really representing them. And so
people felt like they should be double asked about this.
Well, people felt, you know, President Trump always talks about America first. And what happened is we came off of the 2020 election, which myself and many people believe was stolen and rigged because of the way that, you know, there was a lot of election fraud. And the president just had a press conference about this the other day. And so there's a lot of animosity, and some people felt like Joe Biden was illegitimate. And then all of a sudden, you know, Joe Biden is signing off on sending so much aid to Ukraine. I think a lot of people felt very resentful, and I think rightfully so, right? I think a lot of people are struggling in the United States. I know a lot of people are struggling. And sometimes Americans want to know, and I believe they deserve an answer. Why should I care about the interests of another country if I can't afford to feed my children? Why should I care about sending my taxpayer money abroad if I can't afford to put gas in my car? And so I think that, you know, over time, this has been conveyed more. I still believe that we need to reduce aid, not necessarily Ukraine specifically, but just in general, the United States, I think, needs to focus on, you know, reevaluating their budget and limiting all of the aid that they give. But I also have realized that maybe there's just a messaging issue since I've been here in Ukraine. I'll give you an example. You know, you want to know how supporting Ukraine is America first. Well, for instance, we just signed a drone deal with Ukraine. The United States government did. And one of the things that Ukraine has really excelled at over the last nearly 5 years since you've been at war is drone manufacturing. And we're living in a world that is now dominated by drones. And I think that this drone agreement that we have signed with Ukraine is going to really help bolster our national security, because Ukraine produces 8 million drones per year and the United States is going to only produce about 300,000. So really, in a sense, we are kind of deficient as Americans when it comes to our drone manufacturing capabilities. When you compare us to a country like Ukraine, especially wartime Ukraine, where they're able to mass produce so many weapons.